Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Event Industry News Podcast with me, James Dixon, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you tune into today's episode from. Last week, I had the pleasure of talking with Robin Kemp, the Creative Director for Culture Liverpool, and more specifically on this episode of the podcast, the Creative Director for the city's River of Light Festival. This immersive 17-night light event turns Liverpool's iconic waterfront into a free outdoor art gallery of light and sound installations, with the event set to take place from the 21st of October to the 6th of November. When Robin and I recorded this podcast, he was just days away from the production build kicking in fully, so we were very grateful that he was able to spare some time in what was an extremely important phase of the project. We joined the podcast with my first question to Robin, asking him to describe exactly what the River of Light Festival is and how it manifests itself. As I said in that introduction, an immersive 17-night light event. I usually wait until the end of an episode to reference websites and things like that. But anybody who is watching this or listening to this may just want to hit pause now and quickly hop over to visit Liverpool's website and search the River of Light, because there's a great video on there that shows a 2021 event, Robin, that I think in just a few seconds people will really get a feel for what's happening with this event. But give us, first of all, a little bit of describe what it is and how it works and how it manifests itself.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So River of Light, we've been running it now for 6-7 years. Basically, the birth of it, really, if you will, actually came out of the 5th of November fireworks show. So Liverpool always had big fireworks shows in parks outside of the city centre. And in 2016, we kind of made the decision that actually, there wasn't a great amount of economic return for those events. Lots of people turned up, they were in a park outside the city centre, they happened and they left again 10 minutes after the show. But also that just generally it felt like things were just slightly shifting in that space. Actually, there was potentially a more interesting way that we could kind of mark this moment in the kind of calendar rather than just a big fireworks show. Yeah. So in 2016, we made the decision to move the fireworks show into the city centre, but the plan was always to actually use that as a chance to be able to grow what has now become River of Light, essentially this light festival. So it was a kind of strategic plan around actually creating kind of a more creative response to that period of time, but also recognising that kind of time between the end of summer and the start of Christmas, that kind of autumn time, can actually be quite a challenge for some areas, in particular around the hospitality industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pre-Christmas, you've not quite hit the Christmas sort of events schedule yet, have you?
Absolutely. So it felt like there was a kind of window there for us in that, and in kind of consultation with the sort of the local bid and with some of the hoteliers, we recognised this opportunity. So over the years, we've actually, and the additions we've done, we've been growing the event both in terms of like its footprint, so in terms of how long it's on in the calendar year, and also I think sort of the scale and the ambition of the works that we've been able to present. So in the first sort of couple of years, we really were just bringing in existing light artworks, testing them, beginning to sort of work out what worked in Liverpool. So anyone that knows the city, and in particular the waterfront, it's huge, right?
It really is. Yeah.
The city streets are big. It's a massive vista, and so a lot of international light art festivals, and also some that are kind of developing in the UK as well, they have a huge number of works, 50-60 works, but they're quite small. A lot of them can be quite small, and sort of little interventions. And what we've kind of come to realize is that doesn't really work for us and our audience. Our audience like scale. They like scale, and also it suits the space. There's works in other places that look huge. You put them on the pierhead in Liverpool and they look absolutely tiny just because of what's around them, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So actually, what we've begun to do, been programmed the last few years, is actually a smaller number. So we try and keep it around the sort of 12 to 15 sort of like works each year, but of real scale and kind of purpose. And then over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been kind of curating those that kind of program that works around a sort of a loose theme. So 21 you referenced already. We've got this nice video that sort of sits on the Visit Liverpool page already, which was called Rhythm of the Light. So it was very much about the interaction between light and music, and that was kind of part of the pieces we did. And then this year, at the same time when River of Light is taking place, there's also the World Gymnastics Championships being hosted in the city. So it's kind of huge sporting event, which again is about flow and movement and kind of people and the kind of beauty of that. And so we called it Unexpected Twist. And actually the kind of idea of actually aligning ourselves around gymnastics and movement is kind of tied into it as well. So a number of the works either sort of directly or indirectly have that kind of feeling of something that's slightly unexpected in the way that they return, or actually they kind of have a sort of an alignment to kind of the gymnastics and the kind of look and feel of those things as well. So that's kind of what it's become as a kind of core product, really.
I'm thinking, you know, in the last 6 years, you know, 2016, did you say the first time?
Correct, yeah.
The first year that you ran it, and we were saying, as I alluded to off air, that I've been to Liverpool recently. I have been there before, but I am aware through, you know, media coverage and other, you know, friends of mine that have done work there, that there's been a huge development, hasn't there, in the last decade, sort of 15 years on the waterfront in Liverpool. It is not just a big space in terms of scale. The buildings are big, you know, the views, the vistas are huge across the River Mersey, but the actual development and the infrastructure on that waterfront now is really sort of cutting edge. It's 21st century stuff, isn't it, in terms of the infrastructure, the buildings, you know, the spaces that you've got available. It's clean, it's modern, it's accessible. I presume from a production point of view, it ticks every sort of box in terms of getting some of these installations in.
Well, it's an amazing canvas for that reason. In that what we've now got is a very, very modern, accessible, really well designed public realm, but which sits in front of some of the most sort of iconic architectural masterpieces in the UK, right?
Yeah.
So whether or not you're looking at the Albert Dock, you know, which is, you know, the largest brick building in the country, and it's this absolutely sort of stunning sort of monument to kind of, you know, the city and its past, and also sort of the industrial heritage of the UK, or, you know, the Liver building, you know, the kind of essentially the sort of most recognised building in Liverpool, this kind of stunning piece on the waterfront. You're absolutely right. What we've now got, and we're very happy and lucky to have it, is this amazing space we can program, which artists love, because you've got that chance to either do something that because of the space we have, you know, in that area, to be able to do something that kind of feels quite discreet and kind of supports that, or more often than not, what we're doing is pieces of work that actually that actually kind of play off some of the architecture that surrounds them and their environment. So actually what you have is something that either kind of contrasts with it or aligns to it really beautifully. So it does feel like a kind of, it's a sort of gift to program, really, that space. Also, the way that we've designed River of Light now is, originally we covered it actually a wider sort of physical footprint in the first couple of years, and it actually felt a little bit disparate. And we went to see a couple of shows as well, you know, other kind of light art festivals, and we realised that quite often you're walking for quite a long way to get to a work that may or may not be a little bit underwhelming in some instances. And actually, what we wanted, you know, from the outset was something that was kind of audience led. So what we try and program it so you can kind of see the next work from each one. So although it's not a distinct trail, you know, we don't say you have to follow it in this route or anything like that. We have created it as a loop.
Sure.
So actually, it's a loop along the waterfront and up. So no matter where you get onto it, you can kind of find and navigate your way to the next one. And that works really well for us, because the numbers that we attract to, you know, last year was about 150, 175,000 people kind of came down over those nights. So you've got really significant numbers of people on the waterfront, but we've always been able to manage that in a really nice flow. It always feels like a good atmosphere.
Sure,
because there's a sense of where you're moving. Do you know what I mean? And the kind of like the dynamics of the architecture encourage you to do that as well. So it kind of works really well in our favour, that.
Well, there's two things that jump out at me there. Number one, again, with referencing my, you know, a recent visit, so while it's fresh in my mind, you can see quite a long way over the as when you're on the waterfront with the various docks and the Liver building, the Albert Dock, and the other buildings around it. You can actually see quite, you know, a few hundred meters sort of down the dock and into the distance. So the first thing that I'm imagining is as I'm going on this route, and I've looked at the route map. I bet that there is almost like you're able to dangle carrots of the next installation, because you could be looking at one, but you could probably see another 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 around the actual route, which will encourage people to keep on moving, I presume.
Absolutely that. And again, that's what we've been working through over the last couple of years is how we do that in a way that that's a really lovely way of putting it. Dangling the carrot. So actually, it kind of invites you to want to go and see more. So in 2021, so last year, we actually ran River of Light twice. Okay. So post-COVID stuff. So we did an edition in March time, which was just as we were emerging from that later set of lockdowns. And so there was a lot of kind of scrutiny on that for the right reasons around how we managed it. And then we did it again in October. But those two in particular forced us to think about that in a really interesting way, because obviously the March one, we were still dealing with some issues around social distancing and things like that. We were just coming out of it, had it, but it was quite an interesting thing for us from a production perspective. Think, right, we know we're going to have a really significant number of people. How do we program our content so actually we can support the kind of the sort of logistics and operational kind of side of it? And actually the way that's actually been really beneficial for us in terms of how we now program, even now without those restrictions in place, because it has got that thing where we're allowing space and things and works to breathe, so we know we're going to have an audience around them. But you're right, the ability to see the next one and actually to be able to at some point say, that looks really busy over there, I'm going to circuit that one and go over here, or actually that's fine. It gives the audience a kind of a real chance to understand the environment they're in and be able to know what they're headed for. And we had a work in the edition at the start of last year called Rainbow Bridge, which is a group of American artists, only ever been shown Burning Man before, which essentially is just a 30-foot high huge LED rainbow, right? It's this kind of like huge kind of iconic thing that we could kind of run numbers through. We could run, content through it, run whatever we wanted on it. But just at its core, it became this really brilliant. We realized really quickly it's brilliant having a centerpiece like that people can orientate themselves around. You could see Rainbow Bridge from pretty much the whole route. And actually it's like a festival site, right? Just any festival site. One point that you can identify and go, all right, that bit's there, so I had this way. And actually, again, what we've been now doing is the site Rainbow Bridge was in 2016, at the end of 2021, we had another piece there called Dance Together, which Lucid Creates did for us, which was a huge kind of installation in the same site, which allows people to kind of reference that point again. And we're doing a similar thing again this year as well. So actually, the kind of orientation for the audience around it, a lot of the feedback we get back is people love it because it is a 2-kilometer route, but it doesn't feel like it because you are constantly seeing something new. You're moving. There's an hour and it's a crowd. You know where you're heading. There's no points where you sort of feel, am I going the right way? Is this right? Which is kind of sometimes can happen in those city centre sort of festivals. We've created a system whereby you move through in it and it feels like a really kind of natural flow to the way the audience moves.
From a technical production point of view, you've got these magnificent installations, some of which have been commissioned specifically for River of Light, some of which have been, as you said, on display elsewhere, but this could be the first time that they've been on display in the UK. But because those installations themselves, are the attraction, that they are the light attractions to it, do you have to be careful in terms of putting light production elsewhere? And the reason I ask that is because you've got these beautiful structures, these beautiful old buildings and stuff that in their own right would make wonderful, art installations if lit up creatively. Do you make use of the landscape as well and the sort of surrounding geography and light that in a certain way that is sympathetic to the actual installations without detracting from them?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we've got loads better on in the last few years. And I think part of that, James, is like, we knew this was going to take a while. So we knew when we shifted something, we began this kind of new idea of creating a sort of a light, an outdoor art gallery, essentially, of light, that people needed to see it to understand it. And actually what's been the most kind of encouraging thing for us in the last few years in particular is the business sector around us, the landowners that have kind of part of that as well, or have all 100% got on board with what we're doing with River of Light. So if you take the Life building, for instance, they actually now have a full, not directly because of River of Light, they wanted to do it anyway, but they've now got a full sort of DMX programmed lighting system on the front of the Live building. So on previous years in River of Light, we've actually programmed that with them, and it's become an artwork in its own right using the existing infrastructure. Yeah. We're able to work with those guys to make sure that actually when you're there, the whole of the city around you feels like that. It's the same with the Albert Dock. So the Albert Dock, which dresses itself brilliantly for Christmas. They actually bring some of that forward now, that install forward, so it's lit really beautifully for River of Light ahead of time. It's only like bringing it forward like 2 weeks for an install, but that's a major impact for the audience home. So what we're starting to see, and it's just, it's growing year on year, is actually the recognition that, we might be putting in that kind of core of the installations, but the experience around it from landowners, from kind of other organisations, are adding onto it, and that's kind of always what we wanted. I mean, what's amazing is when you start seeing bars and restaurants doing River of Life specials. That's when you're kind of getting there, because everyone's kind of bought into it and they recognise the value. And we see massive uplift in terms of footfall and numbers, and in terms of sort of 40-50% increase sort of year on year in terms of people going out into the hospitality sector and spending money and on food and drink that have kind of come to the festival. We see footfall increases to sort of 30-40% in terms of the shopping district, and so really, really significant impacts of these things. And so as people begin to see the benefit, they begin to and that's only beneficial for us, right? Because what you want is something big. And if you've just been around it with your kids, and then you happen to go to a restaurant and be able to get a River of Life special, or you get a great cocktail, all these things kind of just build the experience for you as a kind of consumer.
And I would hope that when you look at an organisation like Visit Liverpool, and any city or region of the UK will have its own visit, whatever the region is, and their purpose is to promote education about that region, and allow people who are maybe not from that region to understand its culture, its history, to promote tourism into there, and obviously one of the biggest, you would hope, outcomes from that is a financial gain, and there's nothing to shy away from there. I don't think I don't think people should hide behind that. And I think that if people can come to a project like this and expand their own horizons artistically and emotionally by going to a beautiful installation and following the route, but also that because they've come on a weeknight, a load of the restaurants benefit from midweek, trade that otherwise they probably wouldn't get, and bars, and like you said, shops, that there is not just a benefit to the people who are visiting, but there is a peripheral benefit that, I think we should always be proud to sing about, because, that is of benefit to everybody in the city then.
James, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the truth of it is that we're in a world now where you can't really program something that only delivers in one area. Do you know what I mean by that? So for us, in anything we do, we're looking across the board in terms of what the economics on this, what are the social benefits of this, what's the health and well-being benefits of this, and what's the kind of PR value for it. And if you take River of Light as a kind of example of that, so the economics stack up, right? We know it drives great footfall. We know that kind of converts into spend in bars and restaurants and hotels and everything like that. So as a kind of city, as we mentioned at the beginning, at a time when it can be traditionally a little bit quieter in that window just pre-Christmas, we're really supporting that sector and growing it. So that's a kind of that's a big tick. In terms of kind of some social wellbeing, this is totally free, right? There is no paywall here. You'd have to pay to go on this trail, and we're really passionate about that fact that we keep culture and arts as far as we can in Liverpool. We keep them free. We don't want a barrier to entry. We want anyone to be able to come and access these things. And we work with the local transport providers to make sure that there's easy ways for people to get in and out of the city centre. We've changed our timings a little bit now, so actually they're really family friendly. We start a little bit earlier. We start exactly at 5 o'clock now, so it's just in that twilighty zone, and we kind of close off about kind of 9, half 9, which means actually you've got a window where you're not starting to kind of cannibalise that evening traffic anyway. It is very much a sort of audience traffic family that we're going for. So you get them there, and this is world-class art, right? I think this is the other thing we're really passionate about. It's like, what we're doing more now, and this year's a really big step for us forward into this, is we're commissioning artists that are incredible world-class artists, Yinka Ilori, for instance, this year, who just don't normally work in light art. This is the first time they've worked in light. He's worked in light in this way. Camille Walala, exactly the same, brilliant artists with huge followings, international followings, who've never worked in this medium before. We're giving them this opportunity and working with them to develop these things. It's extraordinary because you as a consumer can come and see this, right? You see this amazing world-class art on your doorstep for free in the city centre. So as a kind of like thing around both, recognition of a culture, in terms of recognition of kind of art and understanding of it, but also, and this sounds a bit trite, it's true, you're also getting people out and about, right? You're walking a 2-kilometre route to do that. So from a kind of like well-being perspective, you're encouraging people to get out of the house, you're moving them around. There's all these kind of different benefits that come with it. And then at the end of it as well, things like this, right? We're able to talk about it publicly. We get huge reach from it in terms of from a PR perspective. Instagram rules the world, right, around marketing. Pretty much everything that we present is totally shareable. They're all Instagram friendly. And actually, I'm not ashamed to say that a lot of the program we do, we think about that. How does this translate in terms of Camp? If I'm going to take a picture of this on my phone, which everyone is going to do, does it work? What's the backdrop look like? How does that fit? How does it work? If I'm going to take a selfie, where do I take it from? Does it, all these things are part of our planning and thinking, because they're crucial. A, to the experience of the consumer, the audience that are coming down, they want to be able to share things. They want to be able to take great images. They want to be able to, be able to light up their Insta feeds with stuff. But also, it's placemaking for the city. If you're really, really honest, actually, if we present a beautiful piece of work in front of an amazing piece of architecture, and it goes across everyone's Twitter feeds, and it goes across everyone's Insta feeds, and it goes on Facebook, it's placemaking for Liverpool. It's helping tell the story that we're trying to tell around kind of modern Liverpool. So for us, a project like River of Light kind of ticks all those boxes, and in many ways, they're all sort of benefit each other, if you know what I mean. They're kind of reciprocal, getting local communities in to kind of come and go around them, bringing in tourists from outside. All these things benefit each of those different steps of the kind of journey.
Yeah, from a communications point of view, by the sounds of things, I would be right in saying it's grown year on year. So every year, by the sounds of things, there are more people. You get exponential growth. You get word of mouth. People saying what a great experience they had, etc., etc. Fundamentally, is it referred to as an art installation? And the reason I ask that is because there will be many people out there who maybe like going to gigs, who like going to live music events and things. They like going to things, but they would go, "Oh no, I don't really do art." Are you conscious of that within your communications, so that you are looking to attract an audience who may not stereotypically be interested in going to an art gallery in its traditional sense?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we are always trying to refine it. So we always talk about it as an immersive experience at its kind of first thing, and the truth of it is, people take that differently, right? Depending on your kind of what you mean by that. But our follow up is always that it's an open air art gallery, and that's kind of, I think, how we perceive it. So we absolutely recognise that this needs to be as broad as possible in terms of the audience, people that can come to it. But we're also very committed to the fact that these are incredibly important and impressive pieces of art, right? These are, there are a lot. Sometimes you go to a light festival and it's just full of pea lights, and it's like, we've lit up a big
moving heads on a building.
I'm not disparaging that at all. Things that make things look beautiful is great, but it's not kind of what River of Light is. River of Light is about a platform for artists to do amazing things that just so happen to get huge audiences because they're also engaging, immersive, experiential, all these things that kind of come with it. So it's a really good point. We think at its core, it's about experience. We think it's about you coming down, friends, family, being able to spend an hour, 2 hours exploring those works, because they're in for 17 nights this time around. Actually, we already, and from previous, what we see is that some people who maybe work in the city might go and see a few, one night, come back a couple of nights later and go and see others, with their with their family or whatever. So it begins to be something that you can actually sort of dip in and out of and experience in different ways. And also, I think we've tried to be, as I say, around how we've sort of designed it and shaped it. We didn't want this to feel like a sort of something that had necessarily a beginning, middle, and end. Like you sort of had to come and, have to commit 3.5 hours to do this. It was actually about, how does it work for you? We've programmed it during the school holidays intentionally, because actually we want people to be able to come bring their kids down and kind of, showcase it. So I think there are so many strands to it. And in many ways, actually, the comms side of it is quite challenging for us, because it does so many jobs for us in terms of it being open, accessible, free, but high quality art. But also that, we're always conscious of, from a production and operation perspective, how we're driving audience and when. So actually our ability to be able to we're really clear when key times are. It's going to be busy between this time and this time. Maybe if you can, maybe think about coming a little later, a little earlier. We're constantly thinking and revising as we go throughout the process of the show about how we do it. And it does create a sort of it does feel like each year, each different kind of iteration of it has its own sort of kind of life cycle, if you will. Like, as in, until you open it and you begin to see how the audience flow around it, there's certain things that you think, maybe that's going to work, and actually suddenly it blows up. People love it. You think, well, hang on a minute, this is really interesting. How we move the audience around this, And so I think all those things around kind of both pre-comms, around how we talk and sell about it, but then kind of during comms, well, it's slightly different to an event, where you've got a 5-hour window on one day or a weekend or whatever. such a long period of time that actually you can finesse and you can help educate the audience around those things. And that in itself is something quite different for us as well as a team that we've all been developing as we go, which is we're an event team, really. We're used to delivering, big festivals that happen over a kind of condensed window of time. And actually, this is a slightly different way of which you want to be talking to your audience.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, on that sort of subject of the duration of it, I was keen to ask whether or not things stay absolutely the same for every one of those 17 nights, or do you have, additional elements of content on certain days, whether that be specific to what you think could be a quieter, day of the week, perhaps, where you think actually we're going to program a bit of an additional content there. Will people see the same every night, or will it be subtly different?
So it's a bit of both. So everyone's guaranteed the experience that we talk about publicly, because I think we've done things in the past where we've kind of done set pieces on certain days, and actually it actually drives too big an audience, right? You actually, what you get is you get a concentration of audience around a specific time. So say there's going to be a live performance on X day on the Sunday. You get a massive driver into that space, and actually it's kind of not what it's there for us to do. So what we actually now do is we guarantee the core experience all the time, but then we supplement it, and we don't tell people we're doing that. So at certain points there'll be pop-up installations of experiences that happen, which then get shared. So the public are there. Oh my God, I've just seen this amazing thing. So I'll give you a great example. In October last year, one of the pieces was a project called Light Piano XL. So it's a Dutch artist, and essentially it's an amazing installation of light boxes that surround a space which are choreographed to a piano. So each key you hit, a different light box lights up. Wow. Now, if you are a brilliant pianist, you can create shapes and movement within the light, and every time you go in there, it's experience. Equally, if you're just a kid that goes up and mashes it with your hand, different light boxes will come up to you, create a moment too.
Well, that's what fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So what we were doing is we were programming different styles of pianist into that at different points. So at different times of the day, you'd have a jazz pianist that would come in and just play a 20-minute set, and it would be this extraordinary thing. Or we'd bring in a concert pianist to perform, and in between that, the public would just come and have a go, and it was open to you to have a play. But by being able to bring in, some of the best moments from the whole last year were where you had sort of unexpectedly brilliant pianists come in, sit down, and just start performing, and they were just stunning musical performances with this incredible light show around them, and the sort of reaction of people to that is just amazing. And you kind of, in many ways, you want that sort of sense of like, oh my God, I've just stumbled across this. Actually, if I think for a show like ours, for a festival like this, if you stage manage it too much and say, oh, at this moment on this day, this person's going to show, it's a different thing. The idea that you stumble across this extraordinary moment that's happening in the heart of a sort of festival, I think, is what's most exciting about it. And so, I'm not going to tell you what, but we have got 3 or 4 kind of quite exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
We're going to sort of program in it as well, which is quite different to something we've done before, really, and we think are going to work really well. So I'm programming those in, and I think that's what I think keeps it interesting and fresh for people. So you're going to be able to come down and you're going to see the works, they're going to be stunning, but actually there might be a little bit of a layer on top of that, which feels like slightly different. And I think that kind of coming back to what we said earlier, I think that's where the sort of benefit of the whole city getting behind it as well really helps. So where you've got retailers doing kind of colouring, lighting things and stuff like that, linked to some of our partners like John Lewis are kind of doing things with us as well. So what you begin to see is actually everyone's experience of River Light begins to feel slightly different depending on who you are and kind of what time you come and when you start. And I think that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I've written down, I scribbled synesthesia down here. I don't know if that's something you've ever come across before, but it's something that I was made aware of for the first time this year, and it's where people experience senses in different ways.
Correct,
so people would instead of hearing music, they would see it as shapes or colors or pictures. And vice versa, and that struck me, that piano installation from last year, really sort of ticks that box. It's something, for some random reason, where you find out about something for the first time, you've never heard it before, which I did about synesthesia at the start of this year, and then suddenly you see it cropping up everywhere. I must have read or seen a dozen different things related to it, and that's what I scribbled down immediately.
Well, I think that's really interesting to say that. I mean, that was last year, this idea of kind of rhythm of the light was absolutely that, and it was how do we tie together music and light in a way that's really interesting, not just here's an artwork and we're going to give it a soundtrack. which is kind of what sort of happens sometimes. So great example that I mentioned Dance Together earlier on. That was a piece of work that we actually did as a co-commission with Chibuku, which was an amazing nightclub in Liverpool, celebrating its 21st anniversary. And they'd found, I should say, this archive of like amazing performances and also kind of poetry and things from like their entire 20 years. They did clear up in the office, and what we actually created was a kind of sound and light piece that actually celebrated the 21 years of Chibuku, but also had within it some of the kind of messaging and the words from some of those original pieces, a kind of a new kind of poetry installation that was linked to it as well. So what you had was, every time you went into that experience, it was different. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that it felt like you were going back into Chibuku, right? And I think that what's really interesting about that was people that, had been to Chibuku 15, 20 years ago, when they were like a lot younger, going in and genuinely being like emotionally touched. Because either it was like a track that they hadn't heard for that long, or it was like, there was messaging that kind of related to it, that kind of felt them.
That immediately brings back memories.
Absolutely. And that ability for art to do that in a way that other things can't, and also in a way for us to do that in a way that's so big and popular. But this wasn't like a big niche thing around a specific thing. It was like a massive installation that was full of families and kids alongside clubbers who would like relive in their youth, sort of thing. So it's this kind of amazing sort of moment. And I think that kind of idea, synesthesia, and how you sort of tie things together is kind of really, really interesting, actually. And in other spaces, we've been looking at that as well at the moment, in other projects in Liverpool at the moment, around how we bring together different strands of kind of either art forms or emotion, in a way that kind of impacts people and affects people. I actually just to sort of park on one thing, don't mind. So the world's quite a challenging place at the moment. There is a lot of really tough things happening around, cost of living crisis and, the future of the world, all these kind of things. And the one thing that we're always saying, and I constantly talking about it, is like, you have to just, at the core of everything you do, it has to just bring joy.
Yeah.
So the core of what we do has to be joyful. Now, that means different things to different people, but I think we've been really clear throughout this year of programming in particular that everything we produce with Light, it's got to instill that sense of joy in you, right? Because otherwise, sort of like, almost like, kind of what's the point, right? We need to be injecting this kind of energy and excitement for people. So I think that, kind of sort of simple point again is like actually having that sort of principle of like, right, let's create something that genuinely moves people, makes them feel happy, joyful, elated, emotive, proud of the city, proud of their family, proud of the place they live, and having a great time amongst, if you can get to that, it feels like, you're sort of doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, with an event, if people just say wow and smile, then you've got them. That's all they have to do. They don't have to say anything else, really. Or if you can inspire a genuine wow moment to somebody, then that's a huge box ticked, I think.
And I think in a city like Liverpool, the audience aren't shy in telling you what they think, and that's really right. That's great. So for us, we know when we get it wrong because we're told, in no certain terms. But equally, the reason why I love programming stuff in Liverpool is you get these incredible layers of emotional reaction to stuff that you genuinely you don't get in some other cities, because it is a very sort of passionate, sort of open, community-led sort of city. And so, we get the most amazing reactions from Liverpool, both on the ground, retrospectively as well. And it is, it's fantastic to feel like, you're doing work that genuinely people enjoy and love, right? And that's both in terms of number of people come out to it, but also just the conversations having people around the route and the things that kind of impact it. Is that, you can't. It's getting so challenging, to deliver big projects, right? We all know the issues the industry is facing around budgets, and we all know around kind of the challenge around resourcing and all those things that, hopefully, will be over the next couple of years will kind of shape themselves out and we'll get back to position. But I think there's sometimes we can, as an industry, get so caught up in the operational requirement of something, or the need to do X, or the budgetary restrictions, you sometimes forget the audience. And I think we never forget the audience. It's like they are the absolute core. And even in the context of those things around the challenges you face, it's always got to be right. What does this mean for that audience member on the ground? And if we get that right, then the kind of reactions kind of tell us that we've put it right.
We're just picking up on a couple of bits there. Challenges operationally, etc., etc. I've scribbled here again on my notepad: technical and artists, and and when I picture and when I've seen some of the installations from 2021 on the video that I mentioned earlier on in the podcast today, the scale of them, the shape, the size, how they're actually structured, requires obviously not just the artist to deliver the piece, but also I would presume a technical team, a more traditional event technical production team, to deliver things like rigging, to deliver things like power, to deliver, you know, ground stacked supports, you know, to support certain elements, and all that has got to be done in line with the artist's, I presume, own vision of how they want the installation to be presented, but also in a manner that, as an event organizer, is done safely and to certain standards. And I'm just wondering whether or not maybe we can touch on some of that, and how much of a challenge it is, how early you have to start, how much constant communication is there between the artists and the technical production side of things, to make sure that as these start to be installed on the waterfront and on the various locations around the city, that things are as they need to be without any compromises to the artistic installation.
I mean, you've sort of hit upon the hardest point of the entire project, really, to be perfectly honest, James. So, I mean, I think, you know, like, so to unpack a bit of that. So we program we try and program 12 months out. So we kind of know now what we want to present next year.
Okay.
But we always leave a gap for new commission. So we've always got new commission work, but we know, I mean, I just as an aside, I would love us to have the budget and the timeline to do an entirely new commission. So it would be extraordinary, but just simply not possible. So we you know, we increase our commissions each year, but basically we know kind of now what we want to present next year. And we begin the conversations, and we're always artist led again, which upsets our production guys a lot, but we're artist led. So it's like, what do you want this to look like, right? And quite often works have been presented before, and we do a lot of research on those works, what worked, what didn't. But the big thing, which I think is sometimes a little different from us with others, is, and this is a massive thing for me in particular, is quite often light works look terrible in daylight. Yeah. So quite often, all the production that you talk about in terms of rigging points, or in terms of guys that hold them down, or into whatever, just look awful in day, and they look stunning at night. And we are in the middle of a, you know, architecturally stunning waterfront with an audience there the entire time. So we are committed to these things looking good in the daylight, and that is a challenge. So we start with the artist. What's the ambition? Where do you want to work it to? And then we take that to our production guys. So we have an in-house event management team at Culture Liverpool, who are, you know, arguably the best in the country in terms of being able to use, you know, a cityscape and be able to turn it into a major event. And so in terms of working really closely with that team, so from a creative perspective, you know, me then working with those guys, and my team working with those guys to make sure that from an event perspective this is going to work. And then we have external production support we bring in specifically. So in this instance, working with REM to kind of come in and work on this as well in terms of how we're going to have that. And then the conversations begin. So to be fair, quite often there is a solution that's existing that we're able to kind of work through, and we get to. We have some instances, and it's quite often on new commissions, where we're shaping these things as we go, you know, and actually there is a kind of sense of these things are running at a twin track between our art and kind of production and where they end up. I guess that's our role, right in the heart of that, which is that our number one priority is safety for the audience. So if anything's unsafe, it's obviously never going to happen.
Of course, without saying.
So beyond that, then, it's, for me, it's like, how close can we get it to the artistic vision? You know, and is that about clever ways in which you rig this, how we change it? And sometimes we've been in a space where we've actually changed the design with the artist to support them in terms of creating their vision, because actually it's just going to be better from a production perspective. So those two extremes, right? Touch wood, so far we haven't had a point where we've had not been able to resolve something. We have had some really challenging conversations, and it always comes down to 2 or 3 things. It always comes down to cable runs, or it comes down to it comes down to fence lines, right? Or it comes down to sort of visible trust. Basically, they're always kind of big three that everyone hates. But I think we've always been able to find a solution. And sometimes we always think with that there's things that always niggle at you. But I think we've done a decent job over the last few years of getting to a point where these things are as good as can be. In our commissioning now, if you look at our commissioning briefs now and the work that we do now compared to where we were 5 years ago, it's chalk and cheese. We are so averse now what can and can't work. Actually, we are briefing in at that point, here are the considerations. And it's so much more beneficial for everyone involved in the process, because it means artists are going in their eyes wide open to say, right, here's the things I need to think about. And here's the considerations, whether it be weight loading, whether it be wind loading, whether it be all these kind of considerations around it. I think that's where we're getting to, where we now understand this site so well, and also we understand the consideration, we understand the audience so well and the behaviours. Actually, we're able to be able to kind of support artists in developing and designing stuff from scratch that facilitates all those kind of production aspects in the background. But it's kind of the core, right? It's the core of the conversation, because it's so easy for things to get too dragged down in production and suddenly lose the entire magic of the work. But equally, there are times when we see initial works and we're like, that is not going to survive one windy day.
A huge, dangling from a single steel cable and a circular truss full of LED screen.
All the classics. So how we kind of find this, and I think that we're now in a place whereby those conversations, we know to have them at day one, and we have them exhausted. But every year there is a challenge, and again it comes down with the site as well. Occasionally we'll put something onto a new, part of the waterfront space. And then only when we sort of investigate do we discover this is an entirely different, sort of thing than we were expecting, because of the historical things that's been underneath it, or whether or not there's kind of, it's been on, dockland and all these sort of things that come with it. So we work with, structural engineers and everyone constantly to kind of evolve and assess and work on those things. But I think we've done quite a nice job up until now of being able to kind of find that kind of mutual sweet spot, right, between kind of things that production and health and safety and everyone related to it are happy with, but which artists also feel can kind of deliver on their sort of initial vision.
We're talking on the podcast today about River of Light with Robin Kemp, the creative director for River of Light and for Visit Liverpool events. I'm going to sort of start wrapping, saying that it's 3 working weeks. We're recording this on a Monday morning, Robin, and we're 3 working weeks away from the opening, as I look at it on my calendar, on the 21st of October. Where do you sit on to, as we record this today? Where are things in terms of that sort of build schedule? Dare I say, I know it's art installation, but we would refer to it in the industry as a build schedule, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. So we're in a good place. So we start installing on the 13th. So we install about a week out is when works start to go in. All the new commissioned works are either fully completed or in the process of being compiled in various studios across the country. And at this point in time, we're in a good place. So all of the kind of all the work that has to be done through JAG and SAG and various other kind of things within the city processes have kind of been completed. And we're actually now beginning the process of actually working. So all our kind of wayfinding, all those things are beginning to start to sort of like, kind of pop up around the city. So at this point in time, we're sort of in a good place. However, which is when it all comes together, right? So we're always, it's not our first rodeo, James. So we know that in the next couple of weeks, there are going to be some challenges. We struggled in last year in particular. We had a few issues around transport, because obviously some of the works were international and the ability to get them in at that point just became so challenging. So we kind of built additional buffers into some of those things. So some of the international works are already in the UK to ensure that we're not. We were fine last year. Eventually, everything opened at the same time, but there were a couple of sleepless nights as to whether or not things were going to make it and stuff like that. So in terms of that, we're in a good place. And I think that our kind of comms and marketing is really starting to kick in now. So this kind of autumn window in Liverpool is hugely busy. You've got, I've already mentioned it, the World Gymnastics Championships. We've also got Our Place in Space, which is one of the unboxed projects, is kind of coming into open in the city. But also the Turner Prize opens around the same time at Tate Liverpool, which is kind of on the route of River of Light as well. So you've got sort of 4 massive kind of projects of kind of national and international significance that are all happening in and around the same sort of window. So lots of our work at the moment is making sure that all of the parties and partners within that are all kind of aligned and we're all talking in the same way. But from a production perspective, our guys were on site on Friday last week, finalising a few bits and beginning some sort of putting in some fixings and stuff like that. And we all feel pretty confident. So it's famous last words, right? 2 weeks before we start installing, but at the moment we feel like we're in a pretty good place.
Absolutely. And I think, on behalf of everybody listening or watching this today, good luck with it. It sounds fascinating. If anybody tuning into this, and we're going to hopefully try and get this podcast out fairly swiftly, so people can listen to some of this whilst the event is very much still accessible and available to people to go and visit. Do go and visit it. If you work in the events industry, it's great to get along to events like this to see. It may relate on no level to the sort of events that you organize if you're listening to this, but inevitably, as I've found, you go to something like this, you will always learn something about the events and your own work on a day-to-day basis just by going to things like this and seeing how they're delivered and taking pictures, ask questions and get them on Instagram. I think would be
that's right, James. Yeah, totally.
get them on Instagram.
We really appreciate it. I think if anyone's interested, visit liverpool.com/River of Light to be able to see the installations that are coming in for this year. Follow across Visit Liverpool or Culture Liverpool, kind of Twitter and Instagram as well. So all that stuff's on there. But we'd love to welcome anyone from the industry to come over, have a look, and then stay in a hotel and spend some money with us.
Absolutely. You'll have a guaranteed great time in Liverpool. I can testify to that. Absolutely. Our thanks today to our guest, Robin Kemp. River of Light opens on the 21st of October and runs until the 6th of November. And just a little reminder to everybody who is tuning into the podcast today that if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, head over to eventindustrynews.com when you've got a moment and you can watch video versions of all of our podcasts as well as checking out the latest news, features, supplements, special features that are on Event Industry News, as well, of course, as the A to Z supplier directory. If you're working in the industry and you're looking for a supplier or a service in the industry, go to eventindustrynews.com, click on the A to Z supplier directory, and you will find a long and fairly exhaustive list of anybody and everybody that supplies something or some sort of service to the events industry. Of course, if you're already on that website and watching today's video podcast, thank you very much for tuning in. And don't forget to go in the opposite direction as and when you've got the time to do so. Go to wherever you get your podcasts from. You can listen to audio versions of all of our podcasts and subscribe. Robin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'll be keeping my eye on it keenly. Do send us some follow-up information. We'd love to get some of the stats, the figures, the key information once this year's event has run. And of course, talk to you once the planning and everything gets underway for next year. So the very best of luck to it. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, James. Really appreciate it.
And goodbye, everybody. We'll see you on the next edition of the podcast. Cheers.